Well, hello to all my friends at the Catholic Marketing Network, Momentum 2020. It is so good to be together with you. I was there in person with the Momentum event last year in 2019, and here today we are all joined together through these virtual connections that are becoming so much more commonplace than ever before. I got to know many of you in my previous role. I started and led an organization called 40 Days for Life through its first decade and was blessed to watch God breathe life into that organization and expand it into becoming the largest grassroots coordinated pro-life mobilization in the world. It was absolutely an incredible journey. And since then, I have stepped away from running that organization. And today I mentor young ministry leaders. I do a lot of coaching and strategic advising for high impact nonprofit organizations and some business organizations. And also I have started up a new tech organization, a new business called Webcast Success, specifically in this COVID-19 environment, helping nonprofits and ministries conduct high-impact, successful online fundraising events, and they have been going amazingly well. Today I was asked to talk about digital strategies and tools for ministry success, and before diving into that, I wanted to kind of set the groundwork with a phrase that I repeat to myself all the time. And the phrase is that tactics are many, principles are few. Tactics always change, but principles never do. I'm going to repeat that. Tactics are many, principles are few. Tactics always change, principles never do. The reason I wanted to start there as the premise for our time together here is that if we're going to talk digital strategies and tools, I'm going to focus more on the principles that affect a digital engagement approach to a business or to an apostolate or an organization, and less to the specific tools because they continually change. How many of us, even a year ago, if somebody had said TikTok, we would have looked at a stopwatch. We wouldn't have thought of that as a Chinese social media company. So the techniques, the tactics, the tools change, but the strategies, the principles do not. So I just wanted to lay that as the fundamental groundwork. Now, quick little bit of background on what I will be sharing to you. I got my experience professionally in the pharmaceutical industry. I graduated from college with a degree in biomedical science. I went out and I peddled drugs to physicians and had a good run of that until June 26, 2001, the day that completely changed my life. That day I was calling on physicians in a little town called Hearne, Texas, about 30 miles north of where I lived. And my cell phone rang, and it was the director of the local pro-life organization, a young woman named Lauren. And she said, "David, I just wanted to let you know that Planned Parenthood aborted 10 more children in our community today." Now, that was a typical day at that abortion facility. Once a week, they would do about that many abortions. But for whatever reason, June 26, 2001, that was the day when my heart just broke. And I remember saying to Lauren, I said, "Lauren, we're not doing everything we know we could be doing. We're not doing everything we can to stop this." I said, maybe what I'm supposed to do is just quit my job and devote my full-time energy to doing that. Now, I was just talking out loud, you understand. But there was a pause on the other end of the phone, and Lauren said, "Well, David, why don't you do that?" I sat back for a second and I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I'm actually looking at staying home to raise my children, and somebody needs to take the helm of this local pro-life organization. Maybe it's you. Maybe that's what God is asking you to do." So I felt like, what am I going to do about this? Well, I went home to my wife and I told her about this, and I was sure she would immediately reject this crazy notion. But she said to me, "You know, David, to whom much is given, much is required. God has richly blessed us, and maybe He's asking us to step out in faith." So we talked to our priest, talked to a few other wise advisors in our life, and 2 weeks from that day, I quit my job, turned in my notice, left the pharmaceutical industry, and took the helm of that little bitty pro-life organization. Now, just for you to understand, I had never run a nonprofit. I had never really led anything. I had no idea how to articulate the sanctity of life, and I didn't even know where to begin. But when I went to the board meeting where the board offered me this job of the executive director of this organization, they said, "David, we're so excited. We're looking forward to having you on board. Just so you know, we've got about a $78,000 budget. We got a little bit of surplus in the bank. We'd like to hire you. Here's the salary that we'd like to offer you." And they said, "We've got these, 5 other employees as well. So, we've got to figure all this out." And they said, "By the way, we've got about 60 days worth of money in the bank, and if we don't figure this all out quickly, it's going to go away very quickly. There weren't very many people involved. There wasn't much money in the bank. And to be honest, there weren't many results that were being achieved by the organization at that time as the abortion numbers kept climbing. And so I realized if I'm going to take this leap of faith, if I'm going to do this, I better very quickly come up with a plan of action. So I immediately immersed myself in books, consultants, training, classes, anything. I invested hundreds of hours over those next few weeks and thousands of dollars out of my own pocket because the organization didn't have any to spare to figure out how do we build an organization? How do we have more people involved? How do we raise more funds? How do we achieve more victories and save more lives? And I spent all that time and all that money and finally came upon a formula based upon principles that never change, not based upon tactics that always do. So I immediately took this formula and I deployed it. And to give you an idea what happened, just in a quick snapshot, the year before, we had a fundraising banquet for that organization, and all of our volunteers and everybody came, and it was about 250 people. It was our smallest turnout we'd ever had. That night we raised about $24,000, which was about a third of this measly budget for this tiny little organization. And the various efforts that we were doing weren't very fruitful because there weren't many people involved in them. And so we weren't seeing much of an effect on the abortion rate. And Planned Parenthood really viewed us as a gnat that was just more of a disturbance than anything. And we weren't making an impact. We deployed this formula, the principle-based formula. And over the next 3 years, we saw that 250 people grow to more than 3,000 people involved in our efforts from 60 different churches across the community. And as more people got involved, our fundraising continued to grow to where that banquet that had raised $24,000, a few years later, it was raising over $400,000. And the first year we deployed this formula, we saw abortions drop by 2%. The next year was a 15% drop. The next year it was a 28% drop. And we realized that we were onto something that worked. Well, over those few years, Nightline, ABC's Nightline, came to town and they documented our community at the end of that time frame as one of the 2 American communities shaping the abortion debate. And Planned Parenthood labeled our town the most anti-choice place in the nation, which we took that as a great compliment, although they never sent us the t-shirt or the trophy. But it was all because we deployed a simple formula that was based upon principles, and this was before we even had some of the digital tools that you and I have at our disposal today. So not only did we see results, but that abortion facility ultimately shut its doors and went out of business, but not before one of the most famous converts who left the abortion industry, the director of that facility, Abby Johnson, had a change of heart and left the abortion industry and came to that local organization that was built upon the principles and the formula that I'm going to be sharing with you to deploy in your digital strategies and tools. So I stepped away from that organization and started 40 Days for Life, which we had done as one local campaign in that community. We saw it mobilize a lot of people in our town. We saw the abortion numbers drop as a result. And so in prayer, an hour of prayer, we discerned that there was an opportunity to do something in a 40-day period, a campaign of prayer and fasting, peaceful vigil, community outreach. And through this, we could scale it to communities across the country. But we set it up. I took another leap of faith. I left my job and I started 40 Days for Life. For the first year, I was the only employee that got a paycheck from the organization and literally said, we've got to do the exact same thing. Apply the same formula. We've got to deploy it. What I learned from hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars of learning, the principle-based formula. And from that one community, that one campaign, over the decade that I served at the helm of 40 Days for Life, we saw the organization grow from one city to 675 cities across all 50 American states and 40 other nations. We saw 2,000 local leaders bring campaigns to their communities, and more than 750,000 volunteers participated, from 0 to 750,000 in a 10-year period. It was unbelievable what God was doing. We also, during that time, when I stepped away, we had zero budget. Literally 11 families in Texas carried me as a missionary for the first year of 40 Days for Life, since I was the only employee and we didn't want to start by asking for fundraising. By the time we left, we had $1.5 million in the bank and a 7-figure budget for the organization. And not only that, we had seen profound results. we saw from those people and their prayers and their efforts, we saw cumulatively 13,000 lives saved during that 10-year period. We saw 143 workers have a change of heart and leave the abortion industry, including Abby Johnson, who spoke at CMN's Momentum last year. And we saw 83 abortion centers close their doors and go out of business. And it was all because, first and foremost, of course, the power of God Almighty. But secondly, it was the deployment of this principle-based formula. Hundreds of hours, thousands of dollars invested to learn and develop this proprietary formula, and I am now going to share that with you so you can deploy this as you use digital strategies and digital tools. Are you ready for this? I'm going to pull it up on my screen. Here's the fruit of thousands of dollars of investment with consulting and training and hundreds of hours of research. This is the model that built that local group, that built 40 Days for Life to become the largest grassroots pro-life mobilization in the world, and that you can deploy to build your ministry, your apostolate, your business, your organization. Here it is. There you go. What? You're not impressed? That's it. That's it. 3 steps. That's it. Attract, connect, direct. And you're saying you spent a whole lot of money and a whole lot of time on something that didn't pay off. Look, here's where I was at. I'm a simple guy. You add too much complexity to it, I get overwhelmed. I need to know every day when I wake up, what do I need to do to grow my organization? What do I need to do to grow the impact of this organization? And I knew every day I need to attract, I need to connect, I need to direct. Let me go through that really quickly, and then we're going to dive down into each of these and talk about how you deploy them specifically for digital strategy. Attract. Well, I don't know about you, but I presume that you have some sort of a mission. You wouldn't be here at the Catholic Marketing Network, Momentum 2020, if you didn't have something that God was asking you to do. Maybe it's to grow your Catholic ministry. Maybe it's to grow an apostolate. Maybe it's to grow a bookstore, a business, a distributorship. Maybe it's to create art and do creative things, to build the kingdom of God, to reach more souls, to change hearts and minds. You've got a mission, but there's only 24 hours in your day, and you need to sleep, you need to eat, you can't do it alone, you need to attract other people. So the first thing we need to understand is why do we need to attract people? It's because we can't do it on our own. So every day we've got to be thinking about, how can I attract people? Whether it's customers, whether it's volunteers, whether it's donors, whether it's people following on social media, we've got to attract. But then, if we just attract a bunch of people, well, heck, I could give you a big bunch of people. I could give you an old phone book. It's a huge list of people, but you have no relationship with them. So that means nothing to you until the second step, you connect. So why is it important to connect? As you attract people towards your effort, as you attract people towards your apostolate, your ministry, your organization, you've got to build a relationship with people so they get to know, like, and trust you and your ministry. And that's a two-way relationship. We're going to talk more about that. So you attract people, you connect with them and build a relationship. But if we just stop there, we only have a social club. We have a whole lot of people who are all getting together. We're all having a relationship with each other, but we're not advancing the kingdom. We're not moving the ball down the field towards the end zone. And that's why the last step is so critically important. Direct. We need to direct people to take steps that will advance the mission that you have and that they share with you as they've gotten to know, like, and trust you and have a heart and a calling to do that which you're asking them to do. So the beautiful thing about this is it's not just a linear process where you start at attract and end at direct, because as you're attracting people, as you're connecting and building relationships, as you're giving them calls to action, that will attract more people. Then you'll have more people to connect with. Then you'll have more people to direct to advance the mission that you and they share, which will attract more people. And it just keeps going as a cycle. It's kind of like a spiral staircase that just keeps going up and up and up. That formula is how I built that local pro-life group. Long before there was hardly any digital tools to work with. That formula is how I built 40 Days for Life from 0 to 750,000 volunteers with many different digital strategies deployed. And this formula, if you deploy it, keep it simple, it will help you every day to know that your digital strategies and the tools you're using are going to ensure success of your ministry, of your business, of your apostolate. So let's dive down into each of these 3 different areas. And I'm going to show you, this is the mind map, this is the plan, the roadmap for everything we're going to cover during our time together here. So first we're going to start with attract. We talked about the why. You need to draw people to you because you can't do this on your own. So the very first step of attracting people is you have to identify your target audience. Now, that sounds somewhat like a secular term, and it's a term that's used in business, but it's so critically important. David Allen, the productivity expert who's written a number of books like Getting Things Done, he has a phrase in his book that I love that he says, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And in the same way, your organization can do anything, reach any audience, but you can't reach every audience effectively. If you try to be something for everybody, you'll be nothing for nobody. It's critically important as a first step that you define who it is that you serve. Who is it you serve? How do you serve them? And what does that service help them to do? An important piece of this is to realize that those people that make up your target audience, they're humans. They're real people with feelings and fears and loves and desires, and they're people who want to be treated not as an audience, but as a person. So one step I would recommend for you is before CMN is over, get a piece of paper, grab a bunch of Post-its, and just start jotting down everything you can. Try to identify your target audience as a person, not as a bunch of characteristics, but think of a person who really represents who it is that you want to serve. Who is it that buys your products? Who is it that is inspired by your music? Who is it that follows you on your podcast or on your YouTube channel? Who is it that you want to speak to? And even to the point where think of that as a real person. Think of what's their age? What's their gender predominantly? What is their level of interests? What is their level of faith commitment? Do they go to daily mass? Do they go only to Sunday mass? Do they go to mass at all? Figure out all those characteristics. And I've at times created little personas, or I've heard some people refer to it as avatars, where you say, this is who I'm trying to reach, so that whenever you communicate with them, you are talking to that person and not shouting from the rooftops to the whole world. If you try to talk to everybody, people will feel like they're just part of a crowd. But if you talk to them like you're sitting having a conversation over a cup of coffee, they will really resonate with you. So the last piece on identifying your target audience I would recommend is try to understand for that audience, that person you're speaking to, their why. Why do they care about what you care about? Zig Ziglar used to have a thing. He said, people always listen to the radio station WIIFM. What's in it for me? And that's what you need to figure out. Simon Sinek has an amazing TED Talk. If you've never seen this, Google this, How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And it all comes down to great leaders inspire action by starting with why. Why does your audience care about what you have to offer? Why does your audience care about your mission? If you can understand that and you can speak to that and you know who that audience is, you're going to be far more effective, whether that's on Facebook, whether that's on Instagram, whether that's on TikTok, whether that's a podcast, whether that's a video channel, whatever it is, you're going to be able to speak more precisely to them. The narrower, the better, because you will be able to speak more specifically to their needs. Now, once you've identified that target audience, you've got to get in front of them. If all you do is say, yeah, I've got these little personas that David told me to create, and I know who this person is and what they're about, well, now you have to say, where do those people congregate? Do they gather at events? Do they go to mass on Sunday? Do they do they subscribe to certain magazines? Do they follow certain influencers? Do they have different things that they have interests in? Find where those people are so that you can get in front of them and make sure that when you do, you have a relevant message, the right message for them. If your message doesn't connect to who they are, why they care about what it is that you're going to be sharing with them, they're going to go the other way. We're in a noisy world, especially the digital world right now. Scroll through your news feed on any social media platform. Go through the podcast list in iTunes on Apple. You're going to see there's so much stuff out there. So you've got to get in front of the right audience with the right message. One recommended resource, if you've not read this book, is Donald Miller's incredible book called Story Brand. Building a story brand, and the subtitle is Clarify Your Message So Your Customers Will Listen. And he talks about how we want to invite people into a story where we're not the hero of the story with our apostolate, our ministry, our products, our services. No, they are the hero of the story, and we come alongside as the trusted guide to help them through that hero's journey story, to help them get what they want, to accomplish what's important to them, their why, and we're helping them on that journey. So once you know who to talk with, then you know where do they gather. For example, which platforms are they on? If you want to reach a younger audience, well, they're probably going to skew more to Instagram than they are to Facebook. If you have an older audience, you may find that, oh my gosh, some of them aren't even on Facebook other than looking at their kids' pictures. So with them, it may be email or even direct mail or other tools. You may go old school on these things. So figure out where they congregate, how they communicate, and then get in front of them and make sure your message matches. And you know how you're going to find out if your message matches? If they respond. If you have crickets whenever you put out a message, if you're in front of these people and you share something and you invite them to take some action and they don't do it, you're going to know, I got to change my message. Be humble enough to realize I've got to help get a message to them that resonates with them, that helps them to understand why this mission that we are on is important to them. So once you have the message, you have the target audience, the third step of attract is you've got to invite them in. If all you do is go out and share a message, but you don't invite them to follow, like, share, donate, become a part of your email list or subscribe, if you don't invite them in, you're not building anything. If you want to attract, you have to attract them to something. So you want to invite them in to sign up for an email, invite them in to subscribe to a podcast or your YouTube channel, invite them in to like or follow your social media page, invite them to take a step to join your family, your tribe, invite them to be a part. Now, if you look at most organizations, I think they make a terrible mistake because they're missing one of the most important things. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of pro-life organizations and many other faith-based organizations, and I tell them all the time, the single most important element on your website is not the donate button, it's not the buy button, it's not the beautiful copy or the videos that you put. The most important element on your website is the invitation for people to join, in most cases, your email list. What? Email still today in 2020 has the highest return on investment of messaging to an audience of any tool. You can pour money into targeted advertising on Facebook or Twitter, or you can do things like that, or you can spend a lot of time building an audience and a following with videos or with podcasts. But if you want a messaging tool that will return your investment of time and money and effort better than anything else currently in existence, your email list should be one of your primary forms of communicating with people. Invite them in. When I was running 40 Days for Life, there was not a single page anywhere on our website where people could not opt in through various different means to our email list because I knew how powerful that was. That one thing alone. You have the right audience, you have the right message, and then you invite them in. Sometimes it may be to follow you on a platform, or it may be to subscribe to on something. But you can't count on them coming back to your website. You can't count. They get a catalog in the mail and they say, this is great, and they set it aside. If you don't have a way that you can continue to connect with them after you've invited them in, you are just hoping that they'll show back up, and in most cases, they probably won't. So again, target audience, right message, and invite them in. And those are the steps that will help you to attract. And you can deploy that across any of the various different platforms. But now let's get into connect, because you're beginning to draw people towards you with the right message. You're beginning to connect with their why. You're inviting them in. But you have to choose where and how you're going to connect with people. You have social media experts like Gary Vaynerchuk that are talking about go out and crush it on every single channel, and he's got literally a team of dozens of people to run all his different social media channels. You and I probably aren't in that position. So we've got to choose the channels where we can connect with people, where we can build the relationship, and where they can get to know, like, and trust us. As I mentioned, I believe email is one of the most important, but for you, it may be, I try to stay simple. I try to stay to 2, 3, at most, 4 channels that I'm going to prioritize as my channels. With 40 Days for Life, I'll just tell you, my channels were, number one, email, hands down, most important channel. I could track, as our email list grew, everything, number of volunteers, number of campaigns, number of dollars coming in, number of lives saved. I tied it all. I could see it. Our list growth completely attributed every other thing that we saw as a result. So number one for us was email list. Number two was online event participation. We found the quickest way for people at a distance, and we had a very distributed audience, to get to know, like, and trust us was through online events. And we started with teleconferences and then audio webcasts and eventually webcasts with webinars and videos and things like what we're doing here today. I've done over 350 online events over the years, some of them as large as 36,000 people, and we've raised at times $400,000+ from each individual fundraising webcast. It's crazy what they can do. I had to pick my channels based on my audience, my message, and how I wanted to invite people in. In the same way, I would encourage you, choose your channels. You can't be everywhere. Are you going to blog? Then choose to blog. Are you going to post on a specific platform the number of times a day or number of times a week that is recommended? Choose your channels in part based on what you feel comfortable with, but more importantly, based upon, is your audience there, and is that the place where you can connect with them and build a relationship and engage with them. So choose your channels carefully. You can't be everywhere, but you can be somewhere, and do it really, really, really well. Okay, the next step after choosing your channels is to understand that this connection is not you broadcasting out to the world. This is building a relationship. Instead of viewing it as, I've got 300,000 followers on social media, put those people all in a room, what's that look like? You can't fit that many people in a stadium. About the only person who can pull a crowd together like that is the Pope throwing a papal mass. And think about if you've ever been to one of those where you're way in the back and you see on the tiny stage, there's just not that level of intimacy and connectedness. We don't have to do that. We have to treat everybody that we connect with as a person, as a human, not just as a persona, not just as an avatar, but as a person. And we want to help them get to know, like, and trust us. I always think of it, the way I picture this is, I want people to feel like, and even here, I hope you feel like this is more you and I sitting across the table, having a cup of coffee together, than it is me on a stage talking to hundreds of people. I hope that's the way you feel. That's the way I'm trying to communicate this, because I want you to feel, I'm passionate about this stuff. I care about it, and I want it to work for you as well as it's worked for not just me and the organization that I've led, but hundreds of other organizations that I've been able to help coach and advise and mentor. Build relationships, and make sure that in the process of building relationships, it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. It's communication. When I started 40 Days for Life, for the first 2.5 years, every email that came in, I personally read and replied to. Everyone. I was up many times till 3 and 4 in the morning, but I wanted people to know there was a real person who really cared. And if I'm going to ask them to do heroic things on the sidewalks to save lives, then I want them to know that I'm in there with them. Once my email literally got to 1,000 incoming messages a day, I finally realized I can't do this anymore. And I had to hire an assistant, a wonderful assistant who was able to help me with managing my messaging, but I still wanted that human touch. And in the same way, whatever channels you've chosen, make sure that if you post something on social media, you don't walk away from it. You get involved in the comments after the fact. If you put up a podcast, do you have a way that people can send in questions and comments and engage with those people? Build a literal, real relationship with them. Be a friend to the people who are investing their time and their name and their information with you. That's a sacred trust. Treat it with respect and build those relationships, and people will be so unbelievably loyal, whatever channels you've chosen. The third aspect of Connect is to be consistent. Instead of just spattering things all over the place and having, I'll do a video this week and then 6 months later I'll do another one. In the meanwhile, I'll do an email and then I'll do this and then I'll do that. If you choose your channels, narrow it down, and then say, I'm going to be consistent, you would be better to do once every 2 weeks than 3 times in 1 week and then nothing for a month and then 2 times the next month. Same way, if you decide, hey, we want to start a podcast that sounds like a lot of fun, the tools, the costs have gone down tremendously, let's do that. If you don't have a consistent pattern, that's the number one reason people unsubscribe from podcasts. Number one reason people drop off of following a YouTube channel is the content is not consistent. So figure out what you can manage. Don't try to be everywhere, but pick those 1, 2, or 3 channels and then be consistent with it. I was consulting a group recently, and they were telling me, David, yeah, we want to do an email program, but we would really like to not send more than one email a month because, good heavens, we don't want to bother people. And I wanted to shake them. I wanted to say, are you kidding me? You're involved in something that is impacting souls, that is saving lives, and you don't want to bother people who care about the same thing that you do? Find out what those people are passionate about and then talk to them as often as is needed that you're able to. And when I was running 40 Days for Life, we were sending out messages every day for 40 days. And when we stopped, people came to us and complained and said, why aren't you telling us all the great stories anymore? Why aren't you sharing what God's up to? Why aren't you still doing it? Just be consistent with whatever you choose and then just build that out. Just set up a calendar and know, okay, this week I have to do these 3 different things on these 3 different channels, and then be consistent with it. And if you do that, I think you'll find that you'll be connecting with your audience. And then the last step of this cycle is direct. And the first piece of this is understand that if you've just gathered people together and if you built a relationship and you have a mission, whether it's to sell a book, whether it's to promote a movie, whether it's to share art with the world, whether it's to invite people to join your nonprofit or your apostolate, you have to call people to action. Nothing happens until somebody calls someone else to action. And that's part of your job. You have to call people to action. Sometimes there was a book, Dedication and Leadership, that was written by the guy who was the head of the Communist Party in England, and he shocked the world. This was many years ago, when not only did he leave the Communist Party and denounce communism, but he became a Christian. And he wrote a book called Dedication and Leadership because people were asking, how did communism get such zealous followers when the church, with this incredibly important message, the gospel of Jesus Christ, we can't get people to do anything? And he, in this book, laid out the problem. He said, think about what you ask people to do. The typical parish, the typical church, how much do we ask of people? Hey, could you maybe be an usher once a month? Hey, could you move chairs around in the parish hall? Hey, could you join our Knights of Columbus chapter? We're talking about the message that can save souls and change the world, the message of Jesus Christ and His church, the one true, holy, apostolic, Catholic church. Why are we asking people to do far more to advance this beautiful, wonderful mission of the church? So we have to understand the importance of asking people to do more, and also when we're calling people to action, not to overwhelm them. Ask them to do one thing at a time. There's the old Russian proverb, man who chases after 2 rabbits will catch neither one. And so it is, if you have an email that you're inviting people to do things and there's 52 links and calls to action to different things, you know what people will do? None of them. If you have an event and you're asking people to do 7 different things, you know what they're going to do? None of them. But if you have one clear thing, you've built the audience, you've attracted them, you've connected with them, and now you're directing them to take one step to advance a mission that you and they share, you have the highest likelihood that they're going to respond to that clear, concise, compelling call to action. One last aspect on this. Never ask people to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. I've seen many nonprofits, many ministries that ask people to give sacrificially, and I look and I ask, how many of your staff are monthly donors? How many of your board members give sacrificially? If they aren't doing that, how can you ask somebody else to do that? And in fact, my philosophy has always been, I have to be willing to do more than I ever ask anybody else to do. When I was running 40 Days for Life, my call to action, when I would go out at a vigil, hundreds of cities around the country, around the world, is I would ask people to commit an hour a day for 40 days, 40 hours in prayer outside of an abortion facility. And you say, that's crazy. Yes, it is. Some people did it. And those who didn't, the bar was set a lot higher. So they may do less than that, but it would still be more than if I'd given them a measly, lame call to action. And in the same way, give people a compelling call to action, be willing to do more. I never had a problem asking people to invest an hour a day because I was pouring my entire self into that organization, that ministry, and there was nothing I ever asked another person to do that I wasn't willing to do more than I was asking them to do. So call people to action. The next step of directing is to make sure that your call to action is tied into your mission. And this is particularly challenging when we have, many different product lines or many different things we're doing. I see nonprofits mess this up all the time, where you get an email and at the bottom it says, buy a house through this realtor and I'll get a commission. Buy light bulbs over here and I'll get this. Use this and I'll get that. It's so convoluted. If you have an important mission, if you have a product, if you have a service, if you have a project, a ministry that is going to do great things, make sure that you're just asking for what you need, and that is in their best interest. WIIFM, what's in it for me? And when you do that, it will be so much clearer and so much easier for them. And then the final step, and I'm going to give you 2 quick case studies to sum this up. The final step is 80-20 or 90-10. Now, this isn't the normal 80-20 rule that we hear about, 20% of your work gets 80% of the results. This is, in my mind, the ratio of how much you direct people versus attract and connect. I would strongly recommend that you don't send every communication out with a call to action. If every email you send, every social media post you make, every podcast is basically saying, buy this, do this, get this, share this, people are going to be overwhelmed and they're going to tune out. We're hit up with too many requests. Instead, spend 80%, maybe 90% of your time attracting people, building the relationships with them through various different means, and then only 10 or 20% of your time are you actually asking people, but you will have so much more effect in your asks. At 40 Days for Life, we only asked people for money twice a year. We did a webcast at the end of our campaign. We would invite people onto the webcast. We had shared all these stories of all the things God had done. I had traveled all around the world, going to hundreds of cities throughout these different campaigns. And at the end, we would have a webcast and tell them, here's what God's accomplished through you. Here's what we're going to do next. And here's what we need. And we would have a clear, compelling invitation to financially give. And people would give, when I was there, 70 to 80% of our entire annual budget through 2 simple asks a year. That's it. But I want you to see how incredibly effective this is. Now, you may say, well, I'm a business. I have to ask people to buy things because we're selling books, or we're selling art, we're selling beautiful statues, we're doing these different things. That's great. But can you build a relationship around that? Can you tell the stories of these products? Can you help people to feel the spirit of what's going on? There are many good, look at your email, and if you get a place that you buy things from that spends a lot of time engaging you outside of the purchase, follow what they do, learn from them, and I think you'll find far greater success in those times when you actually do ask people to respond. So I've gone through this whole model, and I just want to give you 2 quick case studies of what this looks like. I used the one of building 40 Days for Life and the local organization before that. That was entirely built upon this model, and still today. It's continued to grow since I left it because it is simple and it follows these principles that we instilled from the very beginning. Abby Johnson, when she left Planned Parenthood and she came out and she had her conversion of heart, she was asked by several different people to write her story into a book, and ultimately that book was published. It was called Unplanned. Today, more people are familiar with the movie of Unplanned, which came out last year. When the book came out, there were 2 editions of the book. There was Tyndale House and Focus on the Family, who held the rights to the book, and then Ignatius Press was given the rights to sell it to the Catholic market. So since 40 Days for Life, though at the time I wasn't even Catholic, today I am by the grace of God, coming into full communion with the church in 2018. But at that time I was not Catholic. And so we decided and were asked to partner with Ignatius Press to spread the word about this book. Well, the book was a beautiful story. I'd helped a lot behind the scenes with the co-author who worked with Abby to help refine and smooth and polish the story out to make it appropriate for the target audience of pro-life people. And so when they said we're going to be releasing the book, I said, we've got a plan. So what we did is we decided to do a book launch of the Ignatius Press edition. Father Fessio and his team were in great agreement with this. And so what we did is we said, who are we trying to reach? Catholic pro-lifers. What's a relevant message? Those who are pro-life want to hear hope in the midst of the hopelessness of the abortion issue, but we've got to invite them in. So we have to attract them. So we set up a registration page on the web. There's still an archived version out there that you can find. If you go to archive.org and look up unplannedwebcast.com on archive.org, you could see it's old school, the way it was laid out and built, but it worked like gangbusters. So that page, we invited people to sign up for an online event. It was just an audio webcast at the time. 11,000 people, mostly Catholic, all pro-life, signed up for that webcast. During the webcast, we chose the audio event as our channel, email as our communication. We did everything we could in that 1 hour period with Abby on the phone to build the relationship with the audience, to share the beauty of Abby's conversion story, to tell them little snippets of what they would learn in the book. And we just really built that relationship. And we answered questions as they were coming in during the event. But at the end of the event, the call to action was, go buy the book. And we even said, we want this book to be a top 10 national bestseller to send a clear message to Planned Parenthood and to show that the pro-life movement is a force to be reckoned with. So we said, go buy a case of books and share them with your friends, and let's jump this up the bestseller charts. Well, when that book launch was held, we held the webcast, and within the 72 hours from that webcast, we crashed the Ignatius Press website because of the demand on it, and they sold out the entire first print run of books in 72 hours. 15,000 books, crushing the sales of the edition that Tyndale and Focus on the Family had at that point. Now, eventually they deployed other marketing means and their sales grew as well. But it was directly tied into the mission. We only asked after attracting people, building the relationship through the event, and spent maybe 7 to 10 minutes at the end of the event calling people to action. The book became a national bestseller. Then the movie came out of that. And today that movie has touched millions of people around the world. So one last case study of Attract, Connect, Direct is fundraising, webcasts. Right now, online events are way outperforming many groups' previous in-person events. I'm on the board of a maternity home ministry in Virginia where I live. It's called Mary Shelter, beautiful ministry. Well, last year, we had our biggest ever in-person fundraising event. We had about 550 people at our local expo center, had a beautiful event, had speakers, gave awards, everybody came together, beautiful dinner, and at the end, I did the appeal, and we raised $220,000 gross after expenses. It netted $190,000. Well, come into 2020, and we were planning for our August in-person event again. But guess what? COVID happened, and a few dynamics played out in this situation. Number one was we suddenly had this spike in demand for housing. More moms were in crisis because of COVID and financial concerns and were needing housing. But at the same time, due to social distancing concerns, we couldn't house people in the maternity home, so we had to place them into hotel rooms. We had to subsidize rent. Our costs went up, the demand went up. We weren't going to be able to wait till our event, and also we couldn't even get together in person. So I helped Mary Shelter to organize an online fundraising event. Well, instead of 550 people, about 1,000 people participated, 300 and some odd during the live stream of the broadcast, another 700 and some after the fact. And during the event, people gave about $23,000, but through a sequence of messaging after the campaign, they ended up raising just shy of $400,000 net. Double what they had raised last year in the midst of COVID with very minimal expenses and just crushed it. What did they do? They identified their target audience, people who care about moms in unexpected pregnancies, people who care about preborn children, mostly Catholic Christians, and they were able to widen their audience because they were no longer as geographically tied just to our town, and they spread it throughout the region. Then we got in front of those people with a relevant message. We put up a web page to invite people to join this event, told them what they would learn, who they'd hear from. Jeannie Mancini, the president of March for Life, was the speaker, and we invited them to sign up for free. They signed up for the event. We chose the channel of a video-based webcast. Through that event, we built relationships. We engaged with the audience. We responded to emails as they came in. We built this consistent flow. And at the end, we invited people to donate to the organization a one-time gift or a monthly pledge with a matching challenge that would match funds up to $65,000. And we shattered that match. It tied straight into the mission. And even people who themselves were facing financial worries due to COVID gave generously because they said, I care about these mothers, I care about these children, and Mary Shelter is doing great work. So even though the vast majority of Mary Shelter's communications through social media, they're great on Facebook. They share pictures of the babies and the moms, and they're just beautiful. But when they asked, that 10% or less of the time, people responded amazingly well. So this is my model for you, a digital strategy, and then you can pick the tools to deploy with this simple model of attract, connect, and direct. So go through this process, start simple. And I want to share with you a culmination of this. You were attracted to come to be a part of not only CMN Momentum 2020 online, but for some reason you decided to attend this session with this crazy Bereit guy. So you're here. I hope that I've spoken to you because this is relevant to you. I hope I've put out a message that's relevant to you, and I hope I'm inviting you into deeper engagement around this content. The channel we've chosen is this video event that we're holding together. I hope you feel that we've built as much of a relationship as we can virtually, and I'm going to invite you to connect with me more personally so we can build the relationship beyond this and know that I'll be consistent in following up with you. But my call to action is this. If you will commit to this next week, define one thing you will do to attract more people, Define one thing you will do to connect with more people, and do one thing that you will do to direct more people to advance the mission that you and they share. I invite you to follow me and send me your message, your communication, and I would love to help you on that journey moving forward. The easiest way to do this, my call to action to you, is go to webcastsuccess.com. There's an opt-in form on that page. I'm practicing what I preach. Fill in the information, and even if it's not related to wanting to do an online event, we'll follow up with you. And I would love to find ways to help you as you implement these simple strategies and deploy them with tools in advancing your ministry's success. I hope this will advance your mission, and I hope you see that if you do these 3 simple things, you too can not only advance your apostolate, your business, your ministry, your organization, but you can impact more souls. You can help to advance the kingdom of God. God bless you. Thank you so much. It's been a joy being together during this time.